Hi, everybody. Kelly just here with the Philosophy Society. So it's June 12th. It's a Wednesday. We are in the Toronto Metropolitan University Library. There's people in the room, new people, very nice. People are coming back and people online soon, and then on YouTube in the future, which is their present. And so, okay. So before I begin, there's anybody that wants to talk about something that is on the mind? Ben,
Like I got anything?
50 things right now. He's like, yeah, where are you going?
The other day I was thinking, what is Twitter, which is X right now?
Okay.
And I was trying to visualize this thing. And if you were like an alien observing the life on Earth, so what it is, it's just like a bunch of monkeys, new and other, and everyone is shouting their thoughts. Not everyone, some of them, which those who have the courage. And all the other monkeys, they try to attack. they say yes or no, you're wrong. Mostly that you are wrong. And so some monkeys have the larger audience, and the monkeys want to have the larger audience. So what is it even for? So what is this process of shouting out the idea? And ideas are basically how the world works. They describe the world, and this is the collective way of figuring out the truth about how the world works.
Sure.
So that's the idea. And what we are doing is we're trying to figure out the truth about the world. And do you know what's the ultimate truth? God.
Maybe. Okay.
That's the definition of God.
Okay. Well, I think we could talk about what do we mean by truth.
What I mean by truth is the model of the world.
Okay.
That describes the world, and you can make predictions inside the model, and they.
So then God would just be the world or reality.
Yeah, God would be the laws of nature.
Yeah. The universe.
Mother Earth.
Yes.
With everything.
I agree.
So that's like pantheism. That's what pantheism is. Spinoza was like a
God is omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent.
Mhm.
So omniscient means you know everything.
Mm-hmm.
Omnipotent means he can do everything, and omnipresent means he is everywhere. Which is, if you think about it, if you know everything. So your model describes everything with 100% precision.
Mm-hmm.
But the model is an approximation. So
What is it?
We'll just edit it later. Hey, brother. Yeah, come on in.
So the model is an approximation of whatever it describes. So if you want a 100% precision, so you have the model that describes everything in whatever it describes in the universe in our case. And if it's 100% precise, it cannot be smaller than, it cannot be an approximation. So it has to be the exact, at least the exact size of the universe. So if you are omniscient, you have to be everywhere.
Yeah. Well, you would just, if you are the universe, that's a different thing than being a representation of the universe.
Well, the representation of the universe is inside the universe. So,
Yeah.
And if this representation describes the entire universe with a perfect precision, then it's the size of the universe.
Is it though? Because a map can predict with like perfect precision. You can talk about what we mean by that.
No, it's just the definition of a model.
Yeah.
A model is an approximation.
Sure. Yeah.
So, and any description is a model. The description of reality is a model of reality, and it's an approximation.
Yes. I'm not going to disagree with you necessarily. Like, you're doing a good overview.
No, it's just by definition.
Okay. Today we're going to talk about God, anyways, and then the attributes. Did you look at the slideshow? Because you just identified one of the slides, almost verbatim, which is cool. Okay, so I'm throwing out a controversial title there to trigger some emotion, because then you're going to be motivated to say something. right? If I make it neutral, you're like, it doesn't bother me. But if you get a little bit like, hey, I disagree with that, now you have a reason to say something, right? So we'll see. So I put God in quotes. So last week we had a presentation from a student of the Philosophy Society, and that is getting edited. I'm going to post it as a student presentation on the website or the YouTube later. And at the end of his presentation, his thesis is basically God is a social construction of Parivolons. What he means is social systems or social groups. And so I would agree with him that to a certain extent, at least when we think about like religious ideas of what God is, there's something to be said about that. If you guys are online, I'm in the presentation menu, so you're going to have to just talk and cut me off. I will not be offended. Okay. Oh, wait, 1 sec. Let's just see what this can I have to read. Okay, so God does not exist. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through all of the standard arguments for the existence of God and then the refutations of those arguments. So initially, we're going to talk, so second slide. So we're going to have to talk about whenever we make a claim, right, or believe in something, it's going to be an epistemological, it's within the realm of epistemology, right? What is knowledge and how do we know that whatever we're saying is either true or false? And so there's two predominant ways epistemologically that we can know things. We can know them through experience, or we can know them rationally, independent of experience, right? We can reason our way through it and conclude that this is the case, whatever it might be.
But reason from what?
Reason from some premises, or we could just stick. See them?
But would you not need an inaugural experience
You
to extrapolate anything at all?
Yeah, so there are problems with rationalism and empiricism, and we can talk about that, right? Like even thinking through something is an experience. I'm thinking through it, right? So I would say that everything is really empirical, and then there would be versions of like there's direct empiricism, where like Hume would talk about sense impression. Like whenever I know something, I would have to say, what sense impression is the thing derived from, right?
And the stories would be experience or reasoning. Like whatever you're telling right now, it's not my experience and it's not my reasoning, but it's your story.
You would reason through it.
But
So you would, sorry.
Oh, if I don't reason, I just watch a movie, I'm not reasoning, but it's a story, so it's my knowledge.
Yeah, so it's like anecdotal. So that would be like report, the third one I have on there. Someone told you.
So most of what we know is from the stories.
Yeah, you could say that, yes. But then from the story, you can derive like universal truths, for example. That's how science functions. And then it would test those truths, right? Whereas mathematics, we would say mathematics is an example of something that is rational. Like there is no real experience needed to derive at the truth of a claim. So 1 + 1 = 2. I don't need to experience objects to verify the truth of the solution that was found from that.
What's the difference between what is knowledge and what can we know?
So
why you say what is knowledge instead of what we can know?
So what we can know would be like, what is the limit of knowledge? And when we're saying what is knowledge, we're asking what do we mean when we say knowledge in the first place? So first, we would want to define knowledge. I didn't actually define it. I'm just looking at it now. I'm talking about the ways of knowing on this slide, actually. So when we talk about what is knowledge, generally, philosophers, and there's problems with this, they have the true justified belief model. So there is a believer that makes a claim or that has a truth function in their mind, and then they would justify that truth in some way or demonstrate how it's false, right? There's a lack of justification. And so, yeah. So there needs to be the knower, the one who believes, and then there would have to be some statement that can be true or false. And then they would have to be able to justify that statement for it to be semantic knowledge. If it's
What do you mean by semantic?
like it's a statement, it's in like sentence form or it's linguistic. But you can know how to like wash dishes. Like you could
a simpler definition. of
Sure.
knowledge.
tell me.
And knowledge is a model of reality.
Mhm.
And the model can only reside inside a processor, which is brain or the silicon chip.
Sure.
So the book is not the knowledge, it's the knowledge in transit from one brain to another. So the knowledge can only be the knowledge or the model inside of the brain.
Mhm.
And model predicts what's going to happen in the future. So if you want your dishes cleaned, or the knowledge tells you what you need to do, then you test it, and then you get the results that you predicted.
Just so you're saying something can only be knowledge if it is also useful. Because all models, all models lead to prediction, right? They lead to something
Yeah.
that can affect.
Yes, knowledge predicts the future. If it's not the knowledge, then it's just random noise.
Yeah, but I could know that we all came in the room.
Yeah.
But that doesn't predict.
Predict that we are in the room, and that's here the next second.
But we're presently in the room. Prediction would be for the future.
You can predict that we probably will know what you're going to say in the next 40 minutes.
Or that we would remain in the room for the next minute.
Yeah, it can be used for prediction, but knowledge on its own doesn't necessarily contain predictive value. Theories can be evaluated on whether they have predictive values.
The knowledge is only useful if it can predict the future. So it's not useful for survival if you can use it for predicting.
Okay, well that you're evaluating knowledge based on its utility. And you're only allowing, like your definition would be it's only knowledge if it is useful in some way via it can be predictable or give a prediction.
Well, all knowledge gives prediction. So
Does it?
Yeah.
What about the favorite song? Just knowing the lyrics.
Well, the music is a difficult topic which I don't get into. What's it for? What is music? I don't know why does everyone like music? I don't know. No,
Some people don't like
I-
music
I
that
can
much.
guess. I haven't seen the person. People like different music, but I haven't seen a single person who would say no, I don't like music.
All right, well, let's steer it back here. So the context of this presentation is in the idea of the existence of God, right? And so when I'm talking about what is knowledge, I'm saying, well, how can we even know God? So on one way, we can know it through experience somehow. On the other side, we can know God maybe rationally without experience. So when we break down the different categories of experiential ways to know God, one would be from scripture. Someone has read a book that said, this exists. There are bears. There are daffodils. There is God. And you're like, well, I'm going to continue reading. I want to know more about this, right? And then another way that we could know God would be through my perception or some experience, right? So I know a person that experienced God, and the sun in our solar system was this equivalent to the size of God's eyeball. This is what they said to me. And then they said that the reason God doesn't intervene in our lives is because if God moved at all, it would just destroy the earth because of how big God was. I was like, okay,
Who was saying this?
I'm not going to say their name, but there's just somebody that I know that said this to me. And so, yeah. And so that was interesting, but they experienced it. Like, it wasn't just like a story. It was a story to me, but for them, it was them explaining to others what their experience was. Like, I was sitting in a room, there were tables there, and there's a TV in front of me. The God was so big, God's eyeball was as big as the sun. Okay, right? So another way through experience we could know God is somebody told you about it. You know, so you have children, you're like, guess what? God exists, and if you're bad, you're going to go to hell. And Santa Claus also exists too, and you're not going to get presents. You're like, oh my God. And so then you be quiet and you don't cry in the grocery store, right? Or whatever. Like Santa Claus. Another way is through faith. An individual can know God through this thing called faith, right? And it's not really knowledge, actually. It's a different thing because there's no real evidence. It's the lack of evidence, but there's this leap of faith, as Kierkegaard says, and which really is a psychological compartmentalization. When we talk about knowledge, that I know that my doctor is making the right prescription for what I ought to do for my condition, right? And then you can go through your true justified belief that there's evidence to back it up. My doctor's an expert. They make me feel good. whatever, right? Whereas faith is none of those things. Faith is some other psychological process that we have. And when I say compartmentalization, I mean that we kind of put it over here into a different category. People that have faith don't apply the rules of logic or reasoning or empirical evaluation to the belief in God. And as soon as they say that they have faith, conversationally, we almost have to just say, okay, oh, I concede. I give up. You know, I can't say anything anymore to you. You know, it's like a social norm, right? And it's disrespectful to disagree with someone's faith, right? It's like that is the line. You can't cross that line. As soon as I say faith, right? But then it can become weird. Like, for example, someone could say, well, why did you kill those people? God told me, and I have faith in God. In that instance, you'd be like, hey, that's an inappropriate use of faith, right? You're abusing this term. This is like a term that we hold sacred to us. And how dare you, use it in this way? And then there'd be an interesting argument between the person that killed people and the person that doesn't kill people. And what are they going to say? Not really sure. We could do maybe we could do a little segment on that, whatever.
Does this faith, this definition of faith, implies that you just cannot logically to discuss about God and come to agreement? Basically, because you just mentioned, you put them in compartmentalization. It means you cannot use faith means you cannot use logic.
Basically, yeah. Or evidence-based criteria.
But argument based on logic.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, you cannot have argument about God.
Yeah.
That's what you imply, implication.
There's no need to, all the rest of the presentation, if you take the faith route, you're like, I don't need any of this Anselm or Augustine business talk. Get away from, we don't need that, right? There's no reason about God if you have faith.
Synonymous to dogma.
Yeah. And socially indoctrination, right? Like not questioning, just accepting, which we could talk about, and humans' capacity for faith may have had an advantage evolutionarily, because you stay in the group and they feed you and you survive, and you believe in like the bear spirit, and then you don't get fed to the bears. So that's good for you, right? Or you don't get your head chopped off and rolled down flight of stairs and the Mayan or Aztec culture or whatever. That's probably a good thing for you, right?
So does the philosophy has an explanation on why some people have such a faith, but others couldn't have that kind of faith?
Yeah, so the next point. So, well, it's not philosophy per se, but philosophy, I'm assuming, obviously has something to say. But psychologically, psychologists talk about terror management theory. The fact that we're aware that we're going to die creates this terror in us. Ah! Right? There's this existential angst that we experience. And to deal with that dissonance, that uncomfortable feeling or that terror of that we're going to die, we have created something to tell ourselves it's okay, because all of the pleasure you experience in this life is nothing in comparison to the afterlife. Like afterlife, I didn't know that the car lives forever. You're like, yeah, so you invest $5,000 now, it'll last forever, right? It won't break down on you. I give the analogy to, like, whenever you have a belief, you are accepting that belief, right? Just as a salesman would sell you a car, in the sense that I want us to always remember that we have a choice to choose to believe in whatever you want, fundamentally. And critical thinking is that ownership of belief. Otherwise, some form of dogma through indoctrination, maybe, or socialization is the reason why you came to believe the things you do. So once you get the critical thinking magic spell from the Wizard's Tower of philosophy, then you can evaluate your beliefs and determine whether or not you really want them, right? And so just as the car salesman says, this is a great deal, I'll give you $2,000 off, right? Certain memes, we could use mimetic theory, as Daniel Dennett has done, to say that religious beliefs have some function for you, and the belief in itself is trying to survive. The meme has a host, which is the believer, and is trying to survive, which is, in some ways, we have to make sure we don't anthropomorphize, don't give like thoughts and feelings to the belief itself, which is interesting. Like viruses are not examples of life, but they do like survive and do stuff, right? Anyways, so terror management theory is one of the things. I think also it's been used as a way to like console people through grief, right? Which is not the terror of your own death, but it's observing other people dying, right? Or if you're in like extreme suffering, it's to give us meaning to that suffering. And then lastly, which it goes into the next point, is a belief in the just world. Is that when bad things happen to you, and Nietzsche talks about this with the master and slave, that slave mentality is trying to find some explanation for why life sucks for you. And then the creation of this afterlife is a way to justify all the harms that have come to you from the master. And the master is almost like this psychopath that just goes through the world and doesn't think about anything, doesn't care. They just dominate and just take control of stuff. And everybody now that exists are basically slaves. They're slaves to this like socio-political, existential kind of context that we're all in. And so the belief in a just world is that when bad things happen to bad people, and if I'm not a bad person and something bad happens to me, God has a plan and everything will be okay, right? And then, so those are empirical reasons. Those are from my experience, ways that someone could come to the belief of God. And then another way is rationally. We could know through reason. And I'm a little circular in this last point here, but it would just be some argument that is independent of experience. And the ontological argument, and in some ways the cosmological argument, we could say are arguments for the existence of God, where you didn't have to experience anything. No one had to tell you. You could derive that maybe on your own, right? Okay, so before I go to the next slide, anyone wants to comment on where we're at so far?
So the faith is a part of the empirical knowledge.
It actually should be a third category, but I put it in empirical because it's something that you experience. You experience faith. Even though it's not technically knowledge, it would be its own category.
Why is it not knowledge? Because you can predict the future using faith. Every knowledge is based on faith.
Okay.
Or we have to believe in something to start reasoning from something.
I don't think everything would be based on faith, though. It depends how you define faith.
That's how it started.
Okay.
Humanity, right? Civilization.
Okay.
It started with faith.
Okay.
And when you have gratitude, you thank God. Who else are you going to thank if you don't believe in Him?
Well, if I go and buy a burger from McDonald's, I thank the person that made it.
No, you thank God that that's available.
Yeah.
That's how your faith grows,
Mhm.
because you're thanking God for all these blessings.
Okay.
No, I mean,
Or you can thank the universe. You don't have to necessarily thank God.
Yeah.
I mean, you know,
Yeah,
some people
true.
might think they might be the same thing, but
Mhm.
That is also faith. We are believing the universe.
Mhm. I don't think we need faith to believe in the universe, though, because I'm in the universe. I can see it.
well, it doesn't mean you are in the universe. It can be in a simulation.
You could be, but there's no real evidence of simulations. It's more of like a hypothesis.
All you can see is the model inside of your head. You don't see the reality right now. What you see right now is model inside of your brain, and your brain is inside of the black box in
Mhm.
your skull. So you do not know how to interact with reality.
But consciousness and experience is, I think, literally the only
That's the
thing.
model in the brain.
But you can't disagree with that. Like, I can't tell you that you aren't experiencing this right now. Like, that's the only one
No,
thing
that's-
you actually know for
That's
sure.
the argument, is that it exists. Well, where it exists, whether it's the universe or not, that you have to believe.
Sure. But it wouldn't be based on faith. Like there's a lot of evidence. Like the simulation hypothesis is one thing. And there's no way to differentiate. If it is a simulation, it's so good. That's different than the brain in a box idea that like me as a human is really just a simulation because of the product of my sense perception.
Someone created the restaurant. Someone, because made construction, created the kitchen.
Mhm.
So someone had faith. So you have the hamburger thanks to all that faith
I think
from the
society.
past.
I guess so. You can have faith if you want.
Whoever like constructed the restaurant had faith. So
Maybe,
the owner.
maybe.
So you got a burger and it's thanks to someone's faith.
Okay.
And on the day-to-day, you really need faith to
Like we are here in this room because someone built it.
100%. And to that point, on the day-to-day, you can't really operate without having some level of faith. Like if you were to take the percent of chance that someone's going to break the law and stab you on the street times the negative value of that to get like the expected value
I have
of
faith they won't.
One sec,
happen.
let him finish.
to get the expected value of like, should I actually go on the street or not? You would never go out on the street because even if it's 0.01%, the cost of losing your life is not worth it. So you have faith that you won't get stabbed in the street today. And so you walk out.
Is it faith though, or is it more like a probability? Because you're citing probability in some ways, right?
Depends what country you're in.
One sec, let him-
Yeah, so we account for that probability, right? But 99.99 times another normal day, whatever that value is to you, plus 0.001 negative infinity, because like you lose your life. Like that is still going to be a net negative. You'd be safer off in your room. So
Right.
why do you leave?
What's the probability that you lose your life if you don't go out? Well, you'll starve.
Yeah.
For sure, 100%.
Mhm.
Okay, bad example, I guess. But
No,
you
it's
They
still
told me
this is
to
good.
get delivery from groceries.
Okay. But then what if
But
the
you gotta
delivery
work
guy is a
from home.
murderer?
You gotta have a job, what?
The delivery guy's a murderer, right?
But for me, it's probably the probability because there's a probability rate for hitting by a car. You know, the traffic accident, you know, it's actually higher than taking a plane. You know, so when I take a plane, you know, obviously, you know, I just saw a crash, and I saw, oh, okay. But if I don't take a plane, I will still, you know, I have higher probability of hitting by a car. So that's why I have no choice. You know, even I stay at home, as you say, I've been starved. You know, there's an earthquake. You know, and it's so boring, right? So I could hit by a light, by a thunder. You know, so I mean, anything can happen. You know, so for me, it's a probability thing.
Exactly. And to that point, just to rephrase it, but that's it. All expectation is faith in some way. It's a hot hand fallacy in some way. Just
Okay.
because I've lived 23 years and I haven't had some astronomically bad news, let's say, doesn't mean it wouldn't be tomorrow. Like I have faith that it won't be tomorrow, but it could be tomorrow.
And also you're grateful that it doesn't happen. You're grateful that nobody robbed you today or nobody. That's how you can believe in God.
Sure.
Thanks to God, Canada is such a good country.
Okay.
There's one thing I do too. Like, for example, when I pray, I thank God for things that I haven't obtained yet. Like, I thank Him every night to make me, like, let's say, a better leader and a better example, knowing I'm not the best leader nor the best example. But I know that thanking for it in the near future already, kind of having, like, I guess that insight, or I guess that faith, or that hope that I will become a better leader or example. I'm already pre-thanking Him or it.
Natalia, that was your buddy right there. That was Dimitri. Okay, so I think it's important to define faith. The way that I'm defining it would be belief without reason or evidence. So if or experience. So if I have an experience of something, my belief would be proportional to the probability of whatever has occurred, right? Or if I'm doing a cost-benefit risk analysis, my decision or belief would be based on that.
So what would be the evidence for that?
Exactly. And so one evidence could be scripture, that a book says that this is the case.
So how about this? The religion of Christianity exists for a few thousand years. That's the long-lasting institution that survived. And since we live in the survival of the fittest, and the fittest means that which fits inside reality. So that's the fittest description of reality.
Okay.
Satisfactory evidence. The most
Maybe. Maybe. I think, well, if one thing is fittest really means that which produces more offspring, and the yeah.
In reality. Well, that's the same thing. If you say,
Okay.
well, the fittest means the one that fits the best, the model that fits the reality,
Mhm.
which produces the best prediction. You can, the best predictions are the offsprings. The DNA is a description of reality. We are the reflection of reality of this world.
Okay.
So some sort of description. So if the description is better, then we survive longer, we have more offsprings. So that's what the fittest means. It fits the reality. There is different religions and they compete. And the theist survives the longest. And that's been around for a few thousand years, longer than science, and even Newtonian physics was like 300 years.
So just because something survived a long time doesn't necessarily mean that it's true, right? So the fallacy of tradition, for example, just because we've been doing things a certain way for however long doesn't mean that it's true, because like women not having rights or like slavery has been a way of humans acting, but it doesn't mean it's the best way for us to interact with each other, or like monarchies.
The best way. And that
Um,
doesn't mean that it wasn't the best. Oh yeah, well, it doesn't mean
One
it's not the best. It doesn't mean it has to survive the passage of time.
so one second. Yes, online.
Achilles, it's Dougie. I joined with a new email today.
Hey, buddy.
Hey, I had a question early on in the discussion, and then I had another question and another, and it's compounding into an existential crisis. So I just wanted to get off my chest. So
Let it out.
yeah, it's on the nature of faith, right? So I was just initially my question was, hey, why do people get upset when their faith is questioned? Because that was one of your initial, statements that if you question people's faith, it's almost like disrespectful, right? Especially like in religion and stuff like that. My first question was that, but then it compounded into a question of like I just came to a definition of faith where faith could be an instrument we use to basically sustain a way of living that we perceive to be successful. For okay, while Achilles is gone, maybe a member of the audience could like answer it for me. If like, is it a way for us to kind of justify continuing to do something we've done for a long time?
I don't agree. So I would say faith is believing.
Sorry.
I mean, I understand like faith does mean believing, but like we can believe in anything, and what we believe can be like very bad, right? So like we can say a certain faith is wrong because that faith causes harm, right? But that would mean it's something we don't want it to be true. But then that would contradict Achilles' initial saying that we cannot question somebody's faith because that would be a bad thing to do. That would be insulting to another person. And obviously you don't want to insult another person. So what do you say to that, Dimitri?
What say you?
I'm going in the elevator. It might cut out.
Okay, so Dodgy, what was your last point there? Sorry, just make your argument really quick again, if you don't mind. Just so I can.
Okay. I'm more than happy with a brief answer. Just like if you give me a brief answer, and if you want to move on. My question, my statement was is faith a way people use, like a system people use, or a behavior people use as a justification to continue doing a certain ritual or to sustain a belief they've had, and they've had it they've perceived it for a long time to be a successful procedure, and is it a way for them to sustain it? Sustain that over time without
It's a mechanism of dogmatic thinking and indoctrination, predominantly, because in science you're not allowed to say that, right? Or in law you can't just be like, why was the person guilty? I have faith that they're guilty. Like when we look at the two areas of society, or in medicine, two areas of society that, I don't know, almost all of our society hinges on, faith is not something that you can use as a justification. It's more of like a social norm and a way to not make somebody uncomfortable, I would say, right? Because if you question their faith, it's like, it's so taboo. It's like, how dare you, like, who are you to say that to me, kind of thing. And so the conversation usually just stops there. And you have to kind of like have a sense of that, know when to stop asking, you can't.
But isn't that look at the face, the phrase questioning the belief, because to be able to question, you must use reason, you must use logic.
Yeah.
And faith, you just said that you cannot apply logic to faith.
We should edit this so we can see like what we're saying here.
So questioning the faith This phrase itself is self-conflicting.
Exactly. And that's very important insight, right?
To thicken the plot a little bit and maybe reconcile both sides. I feel like you could have a pragmatic view on faith. For example, there's a lot of studies that say doing any sort of ritual on the day-to-day boosts confidence, gives you a better state of mind. And so one might argue that it doesn't really matter what you have faith in. If for 10 minutes a day, every morning, this is what I do exactly. And I repeat these motions. Because regardless of what you do, if you were to mechanically have faith in it every day, you would come out with more confidence. That will have a positive thing, which is evidence, and that would drive into pragmatism, rationale.
Sure. I think if it, but just going with your, like the narrative you're giving here, or the discourse, if it's a repetition, an experience, I necessarily have a memory of something, and then that's like part of my, because I wouldn't say that my dog has faith, you know, that the treats are over here, the food's over there, you know, she knows it's there because she has experience over and over time. But the function of religion fundamentally is to bring people together. We can talk about the power stuff. I don't really want to get into that, but let's just try to look at the positives. Is there any positives? It brings people together. There's a sense of an afterlife. It's used at critical moments in life, like birth, death, marriage kind of thing. So it has this cultural factor. And then there's the afterlife. Sorry?
Sense of community and belongings.
Yeah, yeah. And then there's like the tradition, like people get together, which is the part of the community thing. And so I think those are the properties for why it survived. You know what I mean? And so what I learned from the social, psychological, or community psychology context, like if I'm observing this phenomena and I'm like, why is it the case, right? And how can we take the positive elements and then use it in a different way? That's part of the justification for the Philosophy Society, to remove dogma. Instead of having dogma in scripture, let's have critical thinking, right? And we can still talk about religion if you want to, but we just want to do it in a way that we're being philosophical. We don't want to be dogmatic. And then I think that when you understand faith, you understand, I think you can have a mature intellectual appreciation for faith. And you can almost look at religion in an aesthetic form. Same with culture. This is the way that we like to express ourselves, but I know the limitations of what this thing is. And you wouldn't be a literalist for scripture, for example. You would say there are certain values in scripture that I may derive from it, or more like moral lessons, but I have a philosophical, ethical orientation that allows me to arbitrate what is true and what is false. That is mature. I think that's it is up to you to be religious or to believe in God or whatever. But if for me, I would say that is a responsible way, because what it does is it excludes people taking God's name and using it to like kill people, for example, right? Or like hit kids or some shit, you know? And punitive punishment, all the evidence shows that it increases antisocial behavior and other negative things, right, for children. And so it's important. Sorry, go ahead.
Just talk about this phase. Also reminds me of the leap of faith by Kierkegaard. You know, because Kierkegaard is a philosopher, right? He obviously he's not dogmatic. You know, he's using a lot of logics. You know, so but he still has faith. You know, and I talk about the leap of faith. Why is that? You know, it seems like even with logic you can have faith. It seems to me from the Kierkegaard, the leap of faith example.
So he gives the example of Abraham and Isaac, right? And he gives 4 different readings of the story of Abraham and Isaac. So basically, God spoke to Abraham. He said, you know, you must sacrifice your only son, kind of thing. And so in that moment, does Abraham question God? Does Abraham try to reason with God? What is Abraham's response emotionally, right? And I had this friend when I first studied philosophy many years ago, and she was also a visual artist. She did this print, like printmaking, like this print of Abraham, has this like crazy, like insane psychopath, like the experience of joy in murdering his son, which is such an intense, like whenever I think of the story, I think about that visualization of her artistic rendition of Abraham's emotional expression when he was in the middle of doing this.
He has joy in murdering his son.
Well, it wouldn't be murder. It would be like sacrificing his son for God, right? And so to truly be a believer of God and to have faith would be to just not question at all, to blindly accept whatever God says and then just do it. And I feel that that's kind of a problem.
Why?
Well, if somebody came in here and said, God has spoken to me, I must kill all of you.
How did the God speak to him?
It's not for us to ask. We must just allow it to happen. And whose God is it? Doesn't really matter.
No, that's important.
I agree with you. I completely agree with you. I'm just saying that, like, how do we arbitrate? Like, how do you determine what's true or false in somebody's personal perception or experience of God? Right? Like if they've hallucinated, well, I would call it a hallucination, but if they've perceived some voice or had a vision, you know?
But the Bible gives you the rules how to live, so just follow the rules. So you don't talk to God. The God doesn't talk to you.
But they
There's
were,
no voice from the sky that talks to you. That's just a metaphor.
some people actually experience that.
People experience different things. I took LSD once, so I experienced lots of stuff.
That's cool. I respect that.
That doesn't mean it happened.
Well, I'm just trying to communicate, like if this person's sitting here or wherever they're sitting, right? And we are talking to them, in their minds, they have, like, there's something called the God helmet at McGill University. They put this like thing on people's heads and it stimulates their brain. And then they actually induce the perception of God. They actually have an experience of being in the presence of God, right? So we can like empirically and scientifically create these experiences without drugs. And so if a person is experiencing that, right, that sense of ecstasy or like intense spiritual feeling, and then you have a dry conversation with some other random person, the value in their brain is going to be very, very different. So whatever we say to them, they're like, yeah, okay, you're just one of those people that talk. Yeah, sure. That's much different from an experiential content than this spiritual like oneness with, or like a near-death experience, oneness with God, right? So I think that they would just, like the first time I had the Philosophy Society, one of the members that was sitting here, they experienced God. And it was like nothing I could say. It didn't matter any arguments I gave because they were like, I've experienced it. It has happened to me.
Is the circumstance of that up for discussion?
Well, they would tell you this is the way it is. And if you don't believe me, they could be disrespectful in that meeting, say you're stupid or you don't agree, or, you know, there's something wrong with you, you know, and you're like, okay, well, how does that help me? You know, if God is all loving, like maybe we'll go to the next slide. Okay, well, yeah, we'll go there. Okay, well, here, yeah, okay, we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so one second, we're gonna get to the properties of God after this. So one of the first arguments in the Judeo-Christian tradition for God comes from Aristotle, and it's in his Metaphysics. Daji, this is for you kind of, because you talk about metaphysics. The book is called Metaphysics by Aristotle. And this is a small thing I wrote for my class I took on Aristotle. It was like the beginning of what I was going to write an essay on for this class. So Aristotle discusses and defines the prime mover, which Anselm or Augustine, just check here. Aquinas took Aristotle's ideas and then Christianized his ideas, right? So the prime mover he interpreted as God. So defines the prime mover as stating that the world's generation, how our universe was created, is due to something which has always moved through uninterrupted circular motion. So whether it's uninterrupted circular, those two properties, not really 100% sure if that's necessary. The motion part, he's trying to just talk about, and you've discussed entropy before, how the universe is like expanding. He's trying to talk about that which moves. So that which is moved and moves must be intermediate and therefore a substance of eternal activation. That is the prime mover, moving without being moved. I will argue here, this is my argument, and that's the specific area in the place, is Aristotle, he makes the category mistake. This is the problem with the prime mover argument. It's an analogy of desire in human beings being the efficient cause of objects in physical space moving, and incorrectly assumes this reasoning applies to inanimate objects, the motions of the cosmos. So really what I'm saying is that the prime mover argument, that there must be some unmovable thing that started all of the cosmos. That may be the case, like the Big Bang, you could say, right? The Big Bang is the beginning of the cosmos. But to say that the Big Bang has feelings and desires is the error in Aristotle. And this is the first argument in Western philosophy, quote unquote. Hindu, Brahmanism, and Buddhism. Buddhism don't even in this category at all. There's no God really in Buddhism. But Hinduism and Brahmanism have a different perspective. We're not going through that today. However, in this one, that would be the first problem with it. So Aristotle's argument is that if there's motion in the cosmos is founded on this expansion of the universe. There must have been one thing that started the motion that is not moving itself. Otherwise, it would be an infinite regress. There has to be a beginning to all of what we have. And so that beginning, he calls the prime mover, the thing that started the movement. And Aristotle's mistake is a category mistake, that he is defining this prime mover as something that has a desire, something that has feelings. He is attributing, or we could call it anthropomorphication. Aristotle is putting human characteristics on the Big Bang.
So, and why is it a mistake?
Because there's no evidence to show that the Big Bang has attributes of desire, for example.
There's no evidence that Big Bang happened.
But the second mistake probably is who caused the Big Bang?
Yes, you're correct. Yes. And that's the same thing with the intelligent design argument, right? Even if there's a designer, who designed the designer? And it's an infinite regress problem again, right?
I can provide you evidence.
That's fine.
So the feelings and desires are the words that we use to describe something. And that something is regulates our actions in life.
Yeah.
So we want to get somewhere where we feel better than where we are right now. That's the feeling and desires.
Okay.
But those things, they are rooted in physics.
Yes.
So
sure.
we just call them with human words. But everything is rooted in physics, which started at the Big Bang. So it's just those words are incorrect, but it's still the same process that started at the Big Bang and going through here right now in the form of humans. So it must be like it actually cannot be otherwise. That it must have the same properties as it has right now. Otherwise, we would be violating the laws of physics, which is not possible.
Sure. Yes.
So that's not an error.
Well, the error is that when you like the laws of physics is a different realm of phenomena than psychological properties like emotions and desires.
No, how is it different? Everything is regulated and governed by the laws of physics. So
Mhm.
psychology cannot contradict physics.
It's not that it contradicts it. It's just that certain properties that occur, it's an emergent phenomena over different levels. So there's physics. This is like the teleological or telescoping perspective on science or the universe, right? We have physical properties, and then there's chemical reactions, and then biological reactions, and sociocultural like phenomena, and then we have psychological properties, or there's a mix between the two of them, you know?
Well, if I
Sorry. Yes, Dimitri?
Sorry to interrupt. I was going to ask, what does electromagnetism fall under?
It's a fundamental force of the universe. It's
So you're
physics.
saying there's like biological, there's chemical, so like that would be
It would be physical.
a physical one. Got you.
Same with gravity and the strong and weak nuclear force. So we could like that's we're getting to the boundaries and limitations of physics that or like the speed of light is a constant, right? Like there's certain things that physics we don't know too much about, and we're trying to understand more. Sorry, we'll continue. Yes.
Does physics still does the physics rule or even mathematics rule still apply if I don't exist? If I don't exist, does 2 + 2 = 4 still matters?
I would say yes. Like reality is that which exists independent of humans and their beliefs. So there's like the social constructivist perspective that, or a postmodern view, that all beliefs or truths are made up by humans, including scientific information. But I don't really believe that's the case. I believe that humans, and you can have comments on this too. I believe that humans perceive the world, we create linguistic models of the world, and a point to what you said earlier, there are objects in our experience. And then there's a model we have of the objects, which would be concepts, right? But there's not just concepts. There is the object of the marker, and then I call it a marker, but even without having language there, I could call it like a bleep blurb. It doesn't really matter what I use, just we call that a marker. So it's easier for us to agree on the term.
But geometry exists because human being perceive things in a three-dimensional. Human being doesn't exist. If we don't have, it doesn't, does 2 + 2 = 4 is a truth for ant or for my dog? I maybe this is not the best example, but what I'm saying is, does this science or whatever rule, does their application is pending on the subjective,
No.
No, I have the answer. So the confusion comes that there is reality and there is a description of reality. And we only deal with the description of reality, which is the same thing as model, the same thing as knowledge. So then now you're conflating, like, if I don't exist, I don't have the model anymore. That's the reality. Yes, it exists. It's just you don't have the model. So we deal with the models. We share the models. And language is a part of the model. It's actually very narrow. In your head, you don't see the word marker. You just you don't even have an image. It's a network. So what can you do with the marker, with the connections? So the marker exists.
Is there an online question?
Yeah, okay. I wanted to ask a question. I know I'm being a little bit annoying here because it's kind of related, but kind of unrelated as well. It's about a metaphysical belief I have that everybody fundamentally has faith. It's just a matter of it's like on a spectrum of, is it like a very abstract form of faith or is it like a very blunt one, right? For example, scientists, very empirical people, the tools they use to be empirical, they're kind of start off from an assumption as well, and that assumption is kind of deduced from like a kind of observation as well. For example, I think there's a famous one where why does the sun rising yesterday guarantee that the sun will rise tomorrow, right? Like, why does repetition form a pattern of causality in nature that we universally attribute, right? That's a form of faith that scientists have. And like a form of faith that religious people have is that, the universe, there's a cause has a cause and a cause has a cause, and that's a problem because at the end of the day there has to be an uncaused causer, and then I'm going to assume, because of some information that was relayed to me, whether it be any religion, that uncaused causer is this certain deity, right? So that's the assumption that religious people make, and there are assumptions that physicists made. But I think at the end of the day, it's that everybody, at every human being possible, like everyone, at the base level of all their beliefs is an unjustifiable faith. It's just a matter of how abstract that faith is. And if my unjustifiable faith can be answered by somebody who has a more thought out vision of reality, versus if it cannot be answered by, most people that I encounter.
Maybe sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was just gonna end with what would you say to that, sir?
Well, I'm defining faith as a belief without experience or reason. And so if you have experience of a thing, that's enough evidence for you to believe in it. And there are problems with experience. Like we have optical illusions, for example, right? Or you see the rainbow. Is there really this thing in the sky? If you could fly, just went straight to it, would you get there and be like, I got the rainbow now? It's a resource. I love it. It's great, right? And so we perceive things, but it doesn't necessarily mean that which we perceive is true. And so that is also a problem of knowledge, which is a refutation of empiricism, right? You could say this is why empiricism is false. Here's an example, And then you could say that's why we use models that derive from experience, you could say, and those abstractions are how we come to know things. Anyways, okay, let's continue. We can continue this discussion, but it's good for us to work our way through the slides. And okay, so attributes of God. So next slide. And so Dennis, you talked about this briefly earlier. This is the slide. And so we have 5 attributes of God here. Depending on what God is. Brahmanism, Hinduism can be a little different, but I'm working with this at the moment. And so omnipotence means that it's all powerful. Omniscience is all knowing. Omnibenevolent is all good. Omnipresent is that it's all present everywhere. And then timeless is that God itself lives outside of time. And that's something from Boethius, which was like a 15th or 16th century monk, Christian monk. And so, yeah. And so when we talk about knowledge, if we go to the previous slide, right, we say, well, how do we know something? Okay. And so when you talk about other things that we know, like I know that there are people in the room, right? I can see them. I have an experience of people in the room, and that will be my justification for it, right? I don't really hallucinate people that often, so it's more likely than not that there actually are people here. I can't like make you do things like in a dream, you know, where I can like induce things in my dream, like in lucid dreaming. You guys are kind of doing things on your own that are completely unexpected to me. I don't know, like whatever, right?
How do you know that this is not the dream, this moment?
It is so imperceptibly different, or sorry, if it was, I couldn't tell the difference anyways. And so that's one thing. The other thing is that there are things happening that I am not in control of. There's also the vividness of the dream, and I can also test certain things like flipping off the light switch and doing things like that, that dreams kind of have certain commonalities. Dreams are very like inconsistent and all over the place. They'll sometimes go from one situation to another situation. Like I'm now on top of a mountain. You guys were all sitting there. We're on a mountain now. It's like what happened? And now we're in an airplane. It's like that doesn't really make sense, right? There's a certain degree of consistency in this experience that I'm having that is based on certain laws or properties. Sorry.
In the dream, though, does it feel inconsistent?
No.
If you become aware of it, you can kind of see those inconsistencies. If you induce some lucidity to your dreaming, if you're kind of like unaware of your dream and you're just passively accepting what it is, then you may not have the perceptual ability to do it in that moment. And you just kind of accept the way it is, you know? But there is a capacity for lucidity within dreaming. There's a skill at doing that. I'm not the best at it, you know? Sometimes I remember my dreams and that's as far as I get really, but I have been lucid. I'm like, oh, and I'll test shit. Like there's someone trying to come and kill me or something like that. And then I'll just like, okay, it's fine, they stab me. And then I don't die. I'm like, ha, you know? Right? Now what are you gonna do? And they just go, ah, and then I don't know, the dream changes or something like that, you know? So in real life, that wouldn't occur. And so I feel there's always this feeling that I'm dreaming. I kind of know that I'm dreaming. And then I'll test the limits of reality within the dream.
So you have lucid dreams a lot?
When I was practicing it before I did, now it's more like I just don't have, there's a certain like skill that I'm writing a paper right now. I'm doing the psychology of sleep right at this moment. And the paper I'm writing is on lucid dreaming. And the evidence clinically for lucid dreaming is it can be used as a treatment for people with PTSD to help them with night terrors and flashbacks. And there's evidence that shows that it actually can help people recover from these negative symptoms. So
That's cool, because not a lot of people can do that.
yeah, when the paper's done, I will share it with you guys. I'll put it on the website. But the research I found gives instructions on how to do it. There's like 4 techniques to induce it. And so the way I want to write the paper is to define what it is. I found neural correlates, so it actually exists in the brain. It's not just like something people make up. And then there's a procedure or a method to induce it. Mm-hmm. And one of the things was like, well, one of the drawbacks could be if you're trying to induce lucid dreaming and develop the skill, will that take away from the quality of your sleep or your ability to fall asleep? Because that could be a thing, right? You're stressed out trying to make it happen, and then you can't fall asleep, you know, or you don't get your sleep is affected. But all people that do lucid dream, they're when they wake up, they feel better, and their subjective well-being is higher, and their quality of sleep is usually better. So there's like when you wake up, how you feel the quality of the sleep, and then your overall well-being. All of those attributes are increased with people that do successfully induce lucid dreaming. That's what I've got so far. So whatever.
It's, you can do it only during the REM, which is like 15% of your sleeping time.
Hmm.
So you'll sleep most of the time without dreaming.
Okay, so we have these properties. A lot of these come from certain verses in the Bible, for example. And yes, let's go to the next slide. So we have two things to talk about here. One is Sartre, the other one is Kant. So there's these properties that have been given to us, right? And where did they come from? They came from a derivation of scripture. So how do we know that these are the properties? And so one thing that Sartre says in a paper called Existentialism is a Humanism, so that you can get the paper there, is the existence of a thing comes before we know the essence of a thing. So existence precedes essence. And what that means is you first have to, he's using it in reference to us as humans. So who you are is defined after. You need to be a human being first, and then who you are will be determined, right? You can't predetermine who somebody is, which is a good thing because that increases your freedom. Your freedom is not known before you determine what your freedom is. I know you were like, freedom's against it. We can talk about that.
How does this increase our freedom?
So if who you were, like, you will be like a bad person, for example, right? Or you're a bad person before you're even born, right? That's not true because it's your behavior, your actions, and your decisions that define who you are. But first, you must exist. You must be born first to behave, act, and respond to people in your experience. And just like in our Stephen Covey text, there's a comment just cut me off. Do you guys want to say something?
No, not really.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if that was sometimes I get these chat messages for WhatsApp. Sorry. So yeah, okay. And so that's for us existentially. That's where he's writing about. But this principle, existence precedes essence, also applies to the existence of God. And what do we mean by that? Well, the essence of a thing would in some ways be like the properties of the thing. So before we can know the properties of something, we would have to determine its existence. So if we go back one slide, go back one minute. If we talk about these properties of God, it becomes kind of challenging to discuss these properties if we haven't proven the existence of the thing yet. Right? So if I say there is an object in the room, you say, okay. And I say, describe the object. And you're like, well, which one is it? Right? And then I point at that. You're like, oh, those are glasses. There is glass on them that are tempered in such a way that it changes the way you perceive your external world. So that some people that have like problems with their eyes, they can see better, right? If you're short-sighted or nearsighted or whatever. And you can say they're black, they have, certain frames to them, and you can describe them. So in this slide, what we're doing is we're describing God. God is this, God is this, God is this, God is this. But that is begging the question, which is a fallacy, that we haven't even proven the existence of God yet. And before we looked at Aristotle's proof, I'm kind of going chronologically because these attributes came after Aristotle, because Christianity was not really a thing and Aristotle was hanging out. And so this might be true, but we would have to prove God's existence first. The only way that we can get these properties is if we went through the Bible and we're like, haha, here are some stories about God. I'm going to agree with these, and these are helping me understand what God is. And again, when we go back to epistemologically, right, our basis for knowledge, you know that God exists. How do you know? Well, I know because this book told me so, right? There are problems with that, though, right? All books can be wrong. I can write something right now. Square or circle. Just because it's written down doesn't mean that it's true. Right?
How the God as a concept was born and what for?
That's like a historical question, like about Christianity, maybe, or maybe the capacity for the human brain.
What it was before. So, but what was the reason? Why are we discussing it?
Order.
Like in this class?
No,
Okay.
I mean, not only in this class, like everywhere,
Yeah,
the entire humanity. So it was introduced for some reason,
Leadership.
and it's a good reason that makes entire humanity survive for thousands of years.
Sure.
So what's the reason
Well, Catherine, what do you say?
Order,
for
leadership.
Oh, like but then there's religion and there's God. So religion is just a set of rules how you have to live and be predictable to everyone around you. Because if you go to some Amazonian tribe, you wouldn't know what to expect.
Sure.
But if you go to any country which is Christian, you kind of know that nothing that's going to happen to you because everyone follows the same values.
Sure. So that goes with her point on order and leadership and so
Yeah,
on.
and God. So we just could have some.
We had to fear someone, so they wanted people
Okay.
to fear God because there's nothing to fear there.
Okay.
That's why we needed.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Well, going with your point, right? If you have all of these rules, you have to justify why people would follow the rules, right? And some non-physical entity that's all powerful and then in Christianity, they introduced this whole notion of hell. Those consequences can maybe direct people into following certain rules.
How
Right.
do we justify the existence of laws in country?
Well, you could just use
Same idea.
a social contract theory. You could just say it's better for all of us if we give up certain freedoms to like steal shit and we all agree to not steal stuff.
Same for religion.
Sure, yeah, you can say that, yeah. And that's probably in some ways like it was an improvement on the barbaric ways that people treated each other at the time.
Now we have jail, right?
Yeah, we have.
Before you had hell.
We can talk.
It allows to build larger societies, larger than what's the Dunbar number, like 150 people.
Hmm.
Then when people don't know each other and still can kind of cooperate.
Okay, let's continue. So next point. Okay, so there's the existence precedes essence point, right? And so first we need to determine the existence of a thing, and then we can discuss its properties or the essence of whatever that thing might be, right? You could also maybe say that I am looking for the existence and here are the properties. Let's go find it, right? Like I'm looking for Tyrannosaurus rex. It may be in the dirt over here. I know what it looks like. I'm going to try to find it, right? Or dark matter. These are what the properties it might be. Try to find it. Problem is that scientifically we have not found God. Hasn't happened, right? So that we're still waiting for that to occur, right? And I forget who it was. It was somebody that was like, if Jesus came down today, instantly there would be the science of Christianity, and we would study Jesus and we would understand Jesus. Just like if aliens came down, there would be the science of this new species, and we would understand it. Just one more slide. Thank you.
But wasn't that just,
Back one.
sorry,
Yeah.
let's go back to this, Sartre, right?
Sartre.
Sartre. Isn't this existence before the essence? He talk about there's two kind of objects or subjects, in the world. One is this can, it's always there. It won't change. A human being, every moment, is changing. You shape your life by all the action you did. So human being is different than this. Like a rock will never change. So you talk about these two things, and then that's why the existence of your life, you cannot say this guy is a bad person. You cannot define a person until he died, because he may change at the last moment to become a good person. So because human being is different than a rock.
Yes.
We
Sure.
talk about that, right? So I think there's something to do with this existence before the essence.
Yeah.
Right?
Read that paper. You'll like it. You'll like that paper. I predict.
But how does this relate to God? I don't understand. That's what I'm-
So when we talk about God as a thing,
Mhm.
right? People will identify properties of God. People say God is all good. God is everywhere. God is forever. But it doesn't make sense to say that those are what God is unless you've actually seen God or have some evidence of God. And the only real evidence that you can cite would be like the Bible.
But doesn't that claim have the belief that everything should be comprehensible by humans to exist? Like that nothing can be beyond humans, is what you're also saying conversely, right?
Yeah, and then we're gonna get to Kant. That's coming. Not in this one, or maybe yes, it's either this one or the next one. But yes, we're coming to that. That God is outside of our experience and it can never be understood. Right?
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, so
The existence and essence. So
Mhm.
this is an example. You wanted to show your slideshow.
Sure.
So that's the essence. But where it's gonna be, we couldn't figure out. It could be on the laptop, on the TV, or on the phones. So the essence existed before the existence of the things that's gonna show the slideshow.
Yes, very good. Very good.
So the same thing with people.
Yeah.
So the knowledge of what is good and evil exists before a human is born. And you don't have a lot of choice. It's very narrow that you are in this society with these values and you have to fit. You can't be running around with knives and
The
bows.
pitchfork.
Yeah, killing bears. And
You're more of a trident guy.
hunting. So no, who you become is already sort of decided mostly. It just depends on your properties, well, whether you like have the 15-inch screen or like the 9-inch screen. So that's the difference.
Well, I think maybe your socio-cultural background or your but that's not the case because just because people grow up in a specific society with certain cultural values doesn't mean they always conform to those values. Right? There's a lot of people that, for example, come from Iran and they're like, I don't want to be in a country with this regime anymore. A lot of women come here because they're like, I don't want to wear a hijab or be beaten in the street because I choose to wear a baseball cap or no hat at all. Right?
But that's just the variation is very little in comparison. Go to like 200 years ago, same place. So
Yeah.
Well, actually, Christian values kind of already formalized most of life. If you go like 5,000 years ago, different tribes.
I would agree that
10,000 or 50,000 years ago. So
there's like a limitation of how far you can go within like your freedoms or decisions for sure. Maybe we could read this paper, it's maybe 10 pages for next week, and then we can discuss it more thoroughly and we can go through it together if you guys want.
So I would say it's actually the essence that is the defining thing that exists all the time. And humans are just processors that host, just like the computers that host
Sure.
the software and pass it around like internet.
So do you get the software from your parents,
from all the other people.
your grandparents, ancestors?
You get it from other people, and they get it from the other people, and a little bit from experience, but mostly from the other people, and they got from other people. Well, mostly from your parents because you spent more time with them,
From school and parents?
and well, parents you spend.
But what if
Yeah.
those who haven't spent time with their parents or in school too much? Then it's from like the experiences, like you said, of like other people. So I think it's the same thing. Like when you say experience and others, because I believe like every single encounter we have is like an experience in a way.
Yeah. Well, we can even reference Stephen Covey in this part. When he discusses being proactive, he says there's 3 paradigms. You weren't there for that class, but I'll just review. There's 3 paradigms that we'll say is deterministic, right? One is like your biology, it's in your DNA. My DNA determines how I'm going to be. Another one is your upbringing, how your parents treated you. That will determine how you're going to be. And then the last one is like your own psychology or your sociocultural context and how your habits and your existing paradigms of the existing ways of seeing the world. And that will determine how you're going to be. He says it's not the case, Stephen Covey. He says that because of the stimulus response relationship and our self-consciousness or self-awareness, we can always stop our reactive ways of being and make a decision. And again, we can argue for you about different discussion, but we can talk. We can make a decision based on certain other things on how we're going to behave or act in a specific situation.
At the social level. There's obviously a few things outside of any human's control.
Yeah, obviously. Let's read that paper. I think like it's like I'm only giving you like a one statement summary of it. There's a lot in there, and I think if you guys want, we can go through it next week and we can discuss it. But that's the link to the paper. So you guys all have the PDF, and we can go through it and then we can give more integrity to what he's trying to say if we look at the whole paper. It gives him more justice in that way, right?
Okay,
Good.
guys.
Yeah. Okay. Sure.
Sorry to interrupt.
Okay.
So I just wanted, like, we've been discussing essence and stuff, but like I don't think we really question like essence itself. Why would we say that essence is something that exists in the world aside from shared subjective experience? But for example, like I've heard examples of people describing the essence of a knife, saying like the blade is the essence of the knife, right? Because it does the cutting. But like, not really. How is that the essence? Because if the blade doesn't have a handle, we cannot handle it, and if we cannot handle it, we can't cut anything with it, right? So the
Okay.
blade and the hinge, like the one you hold it with, that's also an essence, right? And if every part of the knife is an essence, then we just described every part, we named every part of the knife, and then we called it collectively into an essence, which like doesn't much make sense. Like, we're trying to make out the part that makes the knife a knife, not
Mhm.
all parts that make up the knife in total, right?
Yeah.
So like, how can we say essence exists? Like, I'm in the camp of people that say it's not that essence precedes existence or existence precedes essence. It's just that there's no such thing as essence. It's just a way of simplifying things for our purposes.
So it would be like, I can use a different term. The existence of a thing, it comes before our knowledge of the properties of that thing, because the properties are contingent on the object. So like if I say there's a ghost and it has blue eyes, its blue eyes are contingent on the existence of the ghost.
Yeah, but like it's also contingent on a ghosts having eyes to begin with, or not having eyes, right? It's
Sure.
just like how we understand ghosts themselves, right?
Yeah,
Like,
so that's like the Hindu saying your God is omnipresent. Well, my God is the God of like destruction. There can be different kinds of objects that have properties or essences. When I say essence in this context, I just mean properties of the thing. And I'm using it in this context to say that when we talk about properties of God, before we talk about the properties of God, we need to confirm that it is even real.
so we need to confirm God's existence before we attribute properties to God.
Yeah, because how do we really know what the properties are unless we know it even exists? It's a
That is,
fallacy of begging the question.
but that is also in like, we're making assumptions here that understanding the properties of God, we just have to kind of confirm that it's real or true. Because what if people don't care if it's real or true? They have a purpose for believing in those properties of God. It gives us safety, or maybe it gives us justification for our actions. Like, why does the properties of God need to be true? Well, we know that physical properties need to be true, but nobody claimed God is physical.
Yeah, like I like Jedis. I know that they're not real and there are properties of Jedis, but sometimes what people will say is they'll use the essence of God as a justification for God's existence. And that's a fallacy. That's a misstep in thinking. Okay, let's just go to the next point and then we'll keep the conversation, because this is an ongoing conversation. I don't expect us to quickly. Yes.
Yeah, very quickly. Because actually, this one actually reminds me. I want to hear your opinion on argument actually by Heidegger.
Okay.
It's actually also on this existence, because he said something like, we it's not like the first thing is not like we know this is a knife. We just, before we know this is a knife, we already live in this world. We are thrown into this world.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I don't know this door until this door kind of hit my hand, and then I kind of stop and then watch what's going on with this knob. That's what really happened, because at the very beginning we human beings don't just sit here and then like a scientist analyze these things, or this is the length, the width, no, we just I didn't even notice what's the shape. I just drink it. That's more fundamental.
Yeah.
So on God, actually Heidegger has said something. Instead of asking what is a God, his questions are, maybe we should ask, how is it to have this experiences of believing in God? How is it? Like starting with the how rather than with the what? Because from the episteme, what do you call that?
Epistemological.
Epistemological, So it's
epistemological.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah. So his question is more like, what does it mean to you to believe in God?
Sure, okay. Yeah.
Instead of asking, is there really a God or not?
Yeah, that's fine. Like that's a different.
What's your opinion?
Well, it could be true or false. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to actually exist as a real thing. It exists in the context of a narrative or a story, and that's fine. And we can derive morals from that, and that's okay. It's just that some people will take scripture, like the interpretation in Islam of jihad, as killing infidels or killing non-believers as a way to worship God. You could interpret jihad as worshiping God through prayer, but if you make the turn that jihad means to kill any non-believer, that's kind of a problem, right? And I'm not an ethical relativist, like some people could be like, it's okay, it's their interpretation, let them burn somebody in a stack of tires. I'm going to not allow that to happen, right? And so you don't have to be like me, you can do whatever you want, but I want to live in a world where people aren't being killed because of some belief that is an interpretation, so yeah, okay, let's look at Kant for a second. Kant claims the concept of God. So this is just an accurate, I would say, summary. I know it's from Wikipedia, but I just threw this together just so we could have. It would take me a long time to go through all the text. I have a stack of books like this for this project here, but I just wanted to go through the ideas so we can criticize Wikipedia. That's fine. Kant claims that the concept of God is not one of a particular sense. Rather, it's an object of pure thought. This is from the Critique of Pure Reason. Kant asserts that God exists outside of the realm of experience and nature. Because we cannot experience God through experience, Kant argues it's impossible to know how we would verify God's existence. This is in contrast to material concepts, which can be verified by means of the senses. So he's saying that there is no experience of God ever.
That was pure faith.
Sure.
But
But
it's
it
possible to verify its existence.
Yeah.
You cannot experience God because you can only experience God when you become God. But you can verify its existence.
Okay.
And maybe the essence is the God itself. So it doesn't exist, but the essence is the God. So any religion tells you have to become closer to God. And it gives you the properties of what it is.
Yes, sure.
So that's God. The essence is the God. So you have to internalize the essence of the God. So you are an empty vessel. You have to fill it up with the essence of God.
Okay.
So and how you verify it? So you just, if your society follows those principles and gets closer and closer to God. So if it survives longer than and prospers, then it's the right direction. So the science actually is the way to God.
That's cool. That's a pantheism thing. Like an Einstein will talk about that. Sure.
Well, but if
Spinoza?
you
Spinoza and
think the
Einstein.
science creates knowledge, so and at the end of science you'll become omniscient.
Sure. I don't know that.
Well, this is where science ends. If you go until the end of science, you will know everything.
The super intelligent AI is like, I know
No,
everything.
No, it wouldn't be like AI. You have to become the entire universe.
Sure.
And if you know everything, then you can do everything. So you're omnipotent. And
Okay.
because you have to be the size of the universe, then you are omnipresent. So that's the science is the way to go.
Okay. Well, if there's a lot there, that's interesting. I like what you're saying. I think it's interesting.
I learned with you. But with this, I'd say like the claim itself, I might disagree because, like, I mean, the question, does a grain of sand or can a grain of sand experience the desert? Will it ever know it's experiencing the desert? Or will it just see the other grain of sand around it?
Well, doesn't a grain of sand experience?
Yeah. But Kant is saying you can't ever experience God if desert is the God. Like a grain of sand will never know that there's a desert because it's just a part of it. Like it's
Yeah, your analogy is cool. Yeah.
It's just swimming in the desert, right? It's like
Yeah.
a drop in the ocean. Like the drop will never see the ocean.
Yeah.
You will never experience the ocean, but you're just a part of it.
Can you experience the planet? You are a part of the planet.
Nah, I think
Very good.
I think it's the same, right? Because it's
Yeah,
on
it's
the
the
same.
same.
It's the same dimension. Like it's
But I mean, you can experience something. The grain of sand probably cannot. But you can ask yourself if you can experience it. Why not?
Yeah, exactly. You can't. Like it's on the same plane of existence. Like it is on the same dimension. Like if I were to draw something on an A4 sized paper, like it will never see the A4 sized paper because it's on it.
It's like when Carl Sagan talks about I don't know what that's called. The 2D being, and then we have, what was that thing? Ah, damn. Flatland. Yeah. You guys know Flatland?
Yeah.
Yeah. I can show the video, but maybe we'll watch it later. Yeah, it's true. It depends on dimensions, right? And God would be outside of our 4-dimensional experience. There's 3D, right?
And time.
Space, and then we got time. And so God is beyond this. And that's kind of what Kant is talking about. He's beyond space and time. And so what do? We can't know it through being inside of space and time. So you're talking, right? With the grain of sand. Grain of sand is part of the larger concept. Do we have a comment?
No.
Oh, okay. All right, let's go to the next one. The ship sails. Dun, dun, dun. Aquinas, 5 ways. Oh, no. So Aquinas is like, okay, this is before Kant, but whatever. Aquinas is saying this is the cosmological argument for the existence of God. So Aquinas' first way to discuss the existence of God is motion. So the argument is all bodies are either potentially in motion or actually in motion, but nothing can be reduced from potentiality to actuality except by something in a state of actuality. Just scroll down, Natalia, please. Nothing could be at once in both actuality and potentiality in the same respect. Therefore, nothing can be at once in both actuality and potentiality with the same respect to motion. It's either in motion or not. So this is the law of the excluded middle. Therefore, nothing can move itself. It must be put into motion by something else. If there were no first mover moved by another, there would be no motion. But there is motion. Therefore, the first mover is God. Okay. Are there any problems in this reasoning?
Yeah, everything's in motion.
Okay.
Does he apply the causality?
It's assumed in this.
I think it's the same thing with Aristotle.
You're right. Yeah.
Prime agent,
Prime mover.
prime mover.
Prime mover.
It's the same argument, right? He's just explicating it more thoroughly. And the problem is that even if there's a first mover, it doesn't mean it would have to be a man with a beard that floods an entire city, right? Because that's what his version of God is. The just Christian God, right? So the first mover, or like cosmologically, the Big Bang, sure. Like we can talk about that, but the jump to say that first mover, the thing that creates all motion, doesn't necessarily, there's no reason why it has to be a guy with a beard that has a son named Jesus or not. A to-be prophet in Judaism.
I
Right.
disagree.
Okay?
Like it could be a man with a beard, and it could be justified that it's a man with a beard. Like I know I'm mentioning a trivial point, but what I'm trying to say, for example, like it's universally attributed that people who are older, and at least in the past, that men are wiser, and men that are older are wiser. And a property of men that are older is that those men have beards, right?
Okay.
So not having a beard is either a feminine feature or a feature that a man is young, right? But it's different now that anybody, like grooming it's a hygiene thing now, but in the past it's different, right? And God, it was invented in the past, right? So wouldn't you say that kind of makes sense? Like at least a
Okay, one
little bit?
sec. Well, Daji, I'm just going to teach you a lesson here. Do the women in the room have anything to say about men being wiser than women?
I apologize, guys. Like it was not me to say this.
It's okay.
No, at that time, only men were educated at the beginning of time.
Okay.
That's why.
All right.
Yeah,
There was not
women
enough.
had to make children
Yeah,
Does
one
that,
after another because a couple of them would die.
yeah.
does being educated necessitate
And you had to
wisdom?
pray to God to have kids.
Sure. But if you're uneducated, can you still be wise?
Yeah, you experience life, but usually men would go outside and
But men were the
Hunt
teachers,
and-
women were not the teachers of
That's
the
a
community.
mhm. This is an
First, it was
yeah.
old men with beards. So then they
Okay.
said God has a beard. Symbolism. They need symbolism.
I understand. I'm just trying to, the two criticisms. One is sexism, right? And this is an example of patriarchy, that men have, controlled the socio-political framework
Someone
and
had to be
prevented women.
first.
One second. And prevented women from being perceived as wise or exercising their wisdom. But I don't think there's any difference in your sex, whether you're a man or a woman, that would limit you from having wisdom. And wisdom defined as the quality of decisions, judgments, actions, your experience, making sense of things, right? So, Dodgy, I think you could make a better criticism for that argument.
Yeah. It's definitely not me saying that women are less wise. I'm saying that in the time that God was invented, like women were perceived as less wise. So if, say, God was to flood an entire village and kill everybody in the village, they'll be like, okay, God is a man, he's older obviously, and he's wise, that's why he has a beard, right? So he's a symbol of wisdom at the time, and wisdom had had a dick and he had a beard, right? So that was wisdom in the past. I'm sorry.
It's okay. All right, we're going to the next one.
Sorry, I had a question.
All right.
Isn't that only in this recent whatever 5,000 years or 10,000 years that we see this man dominance? Actually, human beings' history, they are much longer. Like before 5,000 years ago, or 10,000 years ago, there's a much longer period. Actually, women are more like regarded superior in a society than men. Much longer. Actually, 5,000 years is only a very short period of a human, it's like a glimpse, So actually, even in some of the tribes today, like I think in some part of Asia, whatever, the grandma still regarded as I think Mexico or some Maya, whatever, the grandma or the women side is actually more superior.
It's like a matriarchy.
Yeah, matriarchy. Yeah. So,
Yeah. This is like an anthropological in Judaism, sure. Okay, very good. Okay, next point. So what are we saying here? So the second efficient cause from Aquinas is saying nothing is the efficient cause of itself. If A is the efficient cause of B, then if A is absent, so is B. Efficient causes are ordered from first cause through intermediate to ultimate effect. By 2 and 3, the premises, if there is no first cause, there cannot be any ultimate effect, but there are effects. Therefore, there must be a first cause of all of them, God. So this is similar to the prime mover argument, but instead of talking about motion, he's using cause and effect, right? So do we see any problems with this form of reasoning?
I don't understand that. Can you give an example of this?
So A causes B, right?
Mhm.
So like the sound was an event. The sound was caused by me dropping the marker.
Yeah.
Right? So if everything in our experience is an event and there are causes before that event, if we go all the way back to the first cause, that has to be something. And what would that be? God. If you want to call it God, that's fine, but it's the same argument that actually gave. It doesn't mean that it's anthropomorphized as someone who gets upset when you don't pray on Sunday or on the Sabbath or whatever. The first cause of all effects doesn't have to be something with feelings that gets upset about stuff. There doesn't have to be anything that has morality. Okay. Because
that's the laws of physics, and we are just the process of the laws of physics, and we are going somewhere. Well, like to the zero entropy. And how do we get there? By following particular rules that were figured out by Christianity through a lot of Christianity or religion, but mostly Christianity, through a lot of trials and error. And right now it's the time that that's the stuff. And it tells us what to do. So, and if you don't follow the science, if you cross the road, the red light, so yeah, the God will kill you.
okay. If I just use I know you said Big Bang doesn't exist, but I'm just going to use that as a conversational.
No, like I mean, something started, whatever you call it, Big Bang, God. Well, this is the correct argument. Something had to start the universe.
We needed order.
Okay.
That's why they created God.
Okay.
There was no, no laws, no police, only God.
Yeah, that's the socio-cultural argument for why we have God today. And I agree with you that is a reason why humans have created this story. But when I'm communicating about the first cause thing, the real problem would just be like, if you want to call that God as a term, that's fine. But the properties of God doesn't necessitate to be like a Christian God, for example. Right? It could just be pantheism again, which is just nature. But to say that God, therefore, is the father of Jesus, there's no connection between Big Bang, right, and Jesus.
There is a competition between the properties of God. We have several religions, and
Yeah, and
we'll
then
see what survives.
there's that one too. Okay,
But,
I never,
sorry.
I never understood that about Jesus being the Son of God, because all men are sons of God.
sure. He's the best son. He's like, my favorite. It's this guy.
Oh, come on.
Well, what else would you say?
Yeah, it just seems.
Son
I
of
believe
God
it's a good role model.
It was-
A good way to live.
Right, I guess it's people.
He's a pastor.
Yeah.
A lot of true Christians, all Christians, I guess, believe, if they're practicing Christians, that he was God's favorite.
Yeah, they believe he was the prophet.
Okay,
And
I got
almost
you.
the reincarnation of God, or like a God incarnate, like as a human being, is Jesus Christ. And Jesus is, is supposed to be a representation of someone that never sinned or something like that.
He was performing miracles.
And he had magic powers.
He was making the blind see and the deaf hear
Yeah,
and the disabled walk.
sure.
So on that argument, wasn't that there's some bug here? Because if you're talking about that you apply causality, basically you're using, basically there's something, everything has a cause.
Yes.
So if everything has a cause, it's a true statement,
Okay.
then the first cause must have a cause of the first cause.
Yeah, it's the same infinite regress problem.
Right. So
Yeah.
I actually, it's self-conflicting somewhere.
Yeah. Well, and this is the thing, is that cause and effect are in some ways within the realm of time. And if time is like, time and space are supposed to be the same thing, right? And time from our perspective, we can measure it numerically. But what is time really? Time in some ways is the difference between events. And we can use a system of, measurement to quantify what that distance is, or difference. Distance is inappropriate because that's a space term, right? But the difference between events, we could use time as a way to distinguish them. It was a day between when the sun was here, it left, and came back. And so the first cause, if we assume that time had a beginning, this is a cosmological assumption that there was a beginning of time, and physics would say that there was, then that's the thing. But whether, again, even if there is a first cause, to connect it to God, you can just stipulate that I'm going to call it Lucifer. Okay, sure, you can call it whatever you want, but you need to justify, when we go back to knowledge, you need to justify why it's the Christian God, why you define it with these properties. Like, why would the first cause be all loving, for example? Why would it have any attributes? Okay, so let's go to the next one.
I just have one question just before you move on.
Okay.
And this will be my last question this entire
Well, you
meeting.
can ask questions, it's fine.
Okay. So this is a good question. So we when we argue about God, when we discuss God, one of the first things we try to prove is that God exists, and that if the universe is caused, there must be a cause or stuff like that. But I'm here to ask if is God using the fact that he created us as a logic of authority, like trailing back from the logic human beings have, that, for example, why is that object yours? And I'm like, it's mine because I made it, right? Is it God invoking that logic again to become an authority over us? All I'm saying is all that creates human beings and the universe a God? Or is you know what I mean? Like, is God a creator? Or can a creator be a creator but not a God?
Well, it depends on how you define God. If you're saying is the Judeo-Christian God a creator, that's assumed in the definition because of Genesis, right? It's part of the story. But if you're talking about like, can we scientifically like find God in the cosmos, and then what is that thing? Like, you know, that is I would just appeal to Kant. Like, what you mean by God, it is this thing. It's out of our experience. It is beyond us. And if you're talking about God from a socio-political context, like what Catherine was saying, then God is something that has been imposed to create, like, as a replacement for law and order in some ways.
So let's say God was not a creator of the universe, and let's say the universe and God and us were all created, and we're all just like creations of something that none of us know what it is. Can that God still be our God? Can we still worship that God, even though he didn't cause us? He's not all-knowing, and he's not like technically all capable. But can that entity still be our God?
Well, like, yeah.
God.
First of all, I don't know why creation has to necessarily be part of it. That again comes from like a certain theological paradigm. The second thing was like worship again comes from a theological paradigm. If there is an alien that created humans, right? You don't need to, you can be grateful. Like, hey, thanks for creating us. Thanks for putting life on earth. That's great. Like we'd like to have a relationship, but it doesn't have to be one of worship and devotion. It can be one of gratitude, but to have worship, if we look at the definition of worship, I think that's an abusive relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that?
That kind of makes sense.
Because all of your existence is devoted towards this other entity, and it creates this dichotomy or this like condescending, patronizing relationship. Whereas you may be very powerful and you may have created my existence, but it doesn't mean that all of my existence is owed to you. I am my own autonomous agent now, and I can decide to do what I want.
Is it better to worship the truth?
Don't worship anything.
That's what
The
the
truth.
devil did.
I wouldn't worship the truth because
That's what the devil did.
okay. What did the devil do?
He didn't want to believe in God.
Yeah, Christians will say that. They say that to non-believers.
You know the story?
I know these stories.
He became a ruler, a leader,
Mhm.
just like God.
Okay.
But God can't rule here. So he created hell. He rules hell.
Okay. All right. I understand what you're saying. Sorry, your point?
The truth, this is what we are looking for. Well, maybe worship is the wrong word to use, but this is the highest value. Otherwise, you will be making mistakes. So unless you're looking for the truth, you will be making mistakes.
So again,
Yeah, you're not born knowing. That's why Jesus.
it's worship is usually specifically related to a deity, right? And the definition of worship that I'm kind of going with is like a complete submission towards that specific entity or whatever it is. And I'm not comfortable with submission in any form. I'm saying that there's a polar opposite to it, that means you're necessarily dominant or dominating things. I'm just saying that like to accept submission in general, imposing a submissive requirement on any being is reducing their autonomy, therefore it's unethical. No, I think
So
that
your
yeah.
autonomy is not good. You're not born an angel, right?
It's not about being an angel.
We're born
Autonomy,
evil, so we need to
I don't believe that.
learn goodness and truth. Because
Okay,
we're born
sure.
with the wrong stuff. We're born bad.
I don't believe that's true.
Sinners.
No, I want to go back to, see, that's exactly one of the reasons why Sartre wrote.
We need laws. We need order.
Yeah, I agree with
We're
that.
not born being good. We need laws and order.
That's not true. Humans are pro-social. We've evolved with that as a property.
You need a parent. You need a guardian when
You-
you're born.
Yes. But we have instincts
You
to
don't know what's
cooperate.
right and what's wrong
That's not necessarily
when
true.
you're a child.
That's not necessarily true. There's evidence that kids will be pro-social even before they've developed language, and they will cooperate without any external influence. Yeah. Okay, let's just go through a couple more here. Let's just try to finish the 5 ways, and then we'll go to the next one. I know that you guys can't see it. I'm just going to read it for you, okay? Or you can go to the link in the thing.
Yeah.
So the third way is possibility and so I have 10 minutes. Possibility and necessity. So we'll keep the questions for later, and then we can bring them up next time, okay? Just so we can kind of get through a little bit of content. Number 1, we find in nature things that are possible to be and not to be, contingent beings. Everything is either necessary or contingent. Assume that everything is contingent. It is impossible for contingent beings always to exist, which is us, for that which cannot be at some times is not. Therefore, by 3 and 4, at one time there was nothing. That which does not exist begins to exist only through something that is already existing. Therefore, by 5 and 6, there is nothing now. But there is something now. Therefore, 3 is false. Therefore, by 2, there necessarily being a God. 2 is everything is either necessary or contingent. So he's saying that, like, if things cannot be, if things are, which is contingency, and sometimes they cannot be, there must be something that is necessary for something to be and not to be. So what is that necessary thing? What is the thing that must exist so contingent things can exist? That thing we're going to call God. But it's the same error as before. Whatever you're going to call the necessary thing, like we live in a reality. This reality, we observe a flower grow and then the flower dies. The flower grows and the flower dies, right? What is the container that is needed for the flower to grow and to die? That container is necessary for the flower. That container is God. It's the same mistake, because you could just say cosmos. The container is the cosmos. The necessary thing is, I'm just going through the 5 ways and just showing why these arguments.
Or just use whatever word you want.
Yes, exactly.
Change the.
I know. Okay, the 4th way, gradation. There is a gradation to be found in things. Some are better, hotter, colder than others. Things are X in proportion to how closely they resemble that which is most X. Therefore, if there is nothing to which is most X, there can be nothing which is good. It follows that if anything is good, there must be something that is most good. Therefore, there must also be something which is to all beings the cause of their being goodness and every other perfection. This we will call God. So he's saying if there are degrees of things, right? Like there is quality to things. There could be high quality and low quality. There must be something to reference the quality of things towards, and that thing has to be above everything. That thing that is above everything in goodness and perfection is God.
Wasn't that this assuming that there's different layers is the nature of reason?
Sure.
You
Yeah.
know, the nature of reason will cause us to think there's this higher things.
Yeah.
But to reason there's a thing, it doesn't equal to its existence.
It's like he's saying there is a category of stuff, right? And the container of category, again, he's just making the jump. And these jumps he's making at the end, like the reasoning is interesting. I like his arguments. Like at least the way that this author has presented them on this website is I like the way that's presented. But the conclusions are not supported by the premises, fundamentally.
Why?
Because God, if you want to call it God, the thing that we compare goodness and perfection to, sure, but that doesn't mean that is what the Bible says it is. It could be anything, really, right? You've only proven that there is something that we compare goodness to and we compare perfection to, right? But it could also be like the concept of a thing. So the concept of a circle, if you visualize a circle in your mind, right? You see it in your mind, and then you see like Achilles just a squiggly thing that I'm supposed to be a circle, and you're like, this looks like a circle, but it's not. And the thing I know it's not of is because I have this concept in mind, right? And I'm using that concept in my mind to judge things in reality. Or if you look at the wall's got a bunch of smudges on it, right? And you can visualize like a perfect wall. Like you went to a new condo, you're like, this wall's amazing. They just did a new paint job, right? And you can say this wall is like a 4 out of 10. Why? Because in mind, I have this gradation, and the top gradation, the best painter that does condos, his name was Joe. Great painter, right? Nice guy. Doesn't charge very much. And that's how I can judge the comparison. But it doesn't mean it has to be God. I just give it a different example. It could just be the capacity for concepts.
When you were 3, did you also have with your mind what's the best wall?
Very good point.
So that's the same for us. We just don't know what's the best thing, but the God is the highest level that we are going to, and we are figuring out what it is.
But why would it be the case that the 3-year-old doesn't have that concept of God or perfection? But then as we grow older, we develop this sense.
We don't, what I mean, the 3-year-old doesn't have enough knowledge to understand what the good world. So the entire humanity just don't have enough knowledge to understand what is God.
That's
Okay,
why you
But
have to be
we have
humble.
the direction.
You have to be humble. Your life is very, very short. So God was necessary for your grandfather. Did they believe in God?
Probably, yeah.
It was necessary back in the day.
Okay. You're referencing Kant again, which is awesome. He's like,
Yeah.
okay, we got one more. Aquinas has got one more swing. He's in the boxing ring. He's like, okay, he's just got like one more punch left. Ready for the last punch? The 5th way design. We observe that natural bodies work towards ends. Anything that acts towards an end either acts out of knowledge or under the direction of something with knowledge. The arrow is directed by the archer. But many natural beings lack knowledge. Therefore, some intelligent being exists by whom all natural things are directed to their end, and this being we call God. So I would say it's not true that all things act that need knowledge as acting towards the end. That we may perceive it and we may know something, but again, our knowledge is limited. And so,
Is that also an argument that because we exist, it's because we live in this planet, Earth, they happen to have the temperature, whatever. So that's why we exist. So if in Mars, we don't exist, right? So if that doesn't, but from this, we cannot induce, there's something, because existence is a result of this temperature, this right temperature. So, but it's upside down. It's like because we exist, it doesn't mean that we have to have something to create that temperature. It's just the fact we exist. In Mars, it doesn't. You see that argument? It just naturally. It just we exist.
yeah,
It's
sure,
because of the Earth has that right temperature.
sure, yes.
But from the fact of existence, we have to find a cause for that. That could be another argument, which is like, you already exist. That's why you can ask this question.
Yeah.
If you don't exist, you couldn't even ask, who created you.
Yes, very true.
So why do you host these meetups? Right?
I believe that having a sociocultural group or educational institution that facilitates critical thinking is the best replacement to religion, actually, because it doesn't have the errors of religion. That's the goal. And then people will have the skills to communicate and reason with themselves and with each other. And that will depreciate mental illness, and it will also depreciate political conflict. That's my thesis.
But why is it good? Why is it better than what we have right now?
Because it's better because it teaches people the skills that are in line with the treatment programs of mental health. So like the same skills of communicating and discussing stuff is kind of what you would do in therapy anyways, right? And there's evidence to show that that's the best way for us to deal with most mental health problems.
So my point is, like, you have an idea of what is good.
Yep.
The way it's coming from.
I'm doing it.
But I mean, that's I'm commenting on the fifth.
No, it's okay, it's okay. I'll still entertain it, but it's fine. It's because I'm looking at what went wrong, and through negation, don't do that. I'm determining this is the way to do it. That's one approach, right? So it is empirical in some ways.
And how did you determine that something was wrong?
So it would be like certain criteria for mental illness, like dysfunction, deviance, if it's hurtful or harmful. And it's just based on that. And then I've created a larger institutional organization that meets those criteria, observing symptoms in the DSM. And then I've kind of arranged it in such a way that it just boosts your autonomy too, and your competency, so that you have the critical thinking skills to evaluate certain political decisions. And then when you make a vote in a democratic society, that vote is representative to what's going on in the world. And you're less going to be, coerced by, negative political forces like.
Yeah, but I mean, all the humanity, we know somewhere where we are going, and we kind of know what is good. We could just let everyone roam around, like all this with people with mental illness. Why do we need to fix them? Why do we need to tell them what's good, what's bad? Let them do whatever they want. Why?
Yeah.
Why is it bad? So somehow we know that's bad. So that's the point of there's some good that is the highest value, and we are going to.
Yeah, but to say that it's like he's assuming that it's knowledge, that there is knowledge in all things that act towards an end, but it's not true. We know things. There's a certain way that we develop knowledge, but there are processes in the cosmos, and to assume that there's this great knower is not, like, you haven't justified that, right? You're just imposing that as an assumption on the mechanisms of the cosmos in itself. But the cosmos is without us doing stuff. Like if all the humans just died from some COVID-like thing, the dogs and the cats would still do their own thing and find some way to survive or not, right? There's no knower
We
necessarily.
are the cosmos. So
Yeah.
we are what the cosmos is doing. So
I know, but my cosmos ends at the table. Like, and we just call ourselves humanity, and I am one human. I end at other people too. Like we can't like go into each other and make the other person do stuff and then come back out. Like if you believed in like spirits and ghosts, and you could be like, like you're
is
possessed.
this what you're doing right now? You're trying to make us act differently by spreading your beliefs.
So the way that I understand it is there's content and process. And my goal, and you could correct me if I'm doing it incorrectly, is to teach process. And some of those processes are like critical thinking and like how to have self-awareness and develop empathy, at least perspective empathy, predominantly in this context. And those properties will embolden and increase the health of the individual and social groups.
No, but this is basically what I said. So you're trying to change our behavior, which you believe is good, by spreading your knowledge, by teaching something.
I wouldn't want to say that I'm trying to change your behavior, because that could be a violation of your autonomy. I'd rather just say that I'm providing an opportunity.
Look, we all do that.
I know, but it's just like I'm trying to provide an opportunity to learn, so you have more control over your own behavior, and then we
That
all
would
do
be
it
changing
together.
my behavior. Because
Yeah.
without your input, I wouldn't be able to. So I wouldn't have the knowledge and the tools.
But you also changed my behavior too.
Well, this is how we, as a group of humans, this is how we evolve. This is how religion evolves.
This is with his disciples.
Yeah, but the difference is that it's not based on indoctrination. Like I facilitate questions, and we can ask each other questions. Whereas if you go to like a church, for example, they just like tell you the way it is, and there is no real questioning.
The
Right.
thing lawyers tell you the way it is.
But in this context, I create the obligation for myself to justify what's going on and then base it in research evidence.
But not everyone has the luxury of research, like the ability, the IQ, the mind, the
Yeah, you're right.
money. So they have to be told what to do, because
Yeah.
the humanity is so complex right now. So you have to be told, like you have to wait until the green light.
Mhm.
Otherwise, God's gonna kill you.
God's not going to do it, but you may die from the guy in the car who wasn't paying attention to the road.
And the God controls the guy.
Sure, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, the justification for that is there's social forces, okay? So like conformity, those that lack the cognitive capacity to understand this kind of information, there at least needs to be a place where if you did ask the questions, that those non-indoctrinating practices exist, right? And then that means you can question stuff and you can change information. That's part of the idea that I've come to. And so there's also a space where people can just conform and they don't have to ask questions and they can follow because they lack that capacity. And that's fine. It's better for them to do it in this context because you still have it open. It's not indoctrinating in the sense that you can ask questions and disagree. And then there is some like the best way to frame it is, well, what if you needed to teach another person to do what you're doing? How do you ensure that that person won't do it incorrectly, right? Because I might die someday. And so if I want this to make a lasting impact, then how would I write it in such a way that I don't have to be there? And so I think that there is a way to compose the social group by making its properties explicit. And there's some course like classes like 2 months ago or whatever, where I go into it more specifically, the properties of the individual and the properties of the group itself. Okay, we're done. That means they're kicking us out. So I will see you guys next week.